Hey, good morning, everybody. Welcome to another Watercooler Wednesday. Dwayne's not able to make it today, so going solo today with this. But interesting topic. One of the things I always address is where do we get our inventory from? And there's a variety of sources ranging from banks to private equity firms to private individuals. It's across the board. One of the most popular areas right now is getting notes that real estate investors, either as an individual or as a larger company, they go out, they buy real estate on discounts, and then they turn around and sell them on terms. So they're creating paper. And when they create that paper, typically they get into a situation where they don't want to do long-term financing. They want to get cashed out, move on to the next property, et cetera. So they need a source to go to cash out of those notes. And we are one of those sources. So as note investors, we do look for the real estate investors who are creating notes on a regular basis. And I'll tell you what, you might hook up with one or two of them, and that's all you ever need in your business because you become the go-to person. Now, even if you run out of capital at some point in time, in other words, you can't buy all the notes that they're supplying, maybe you got three people that are doing a deal a month. So you got three deals coming in every month and you can't afford to take them all on. You can still make money on those deals. You can bring those deals to other investors and make a fee. So it quite literally just having a couple of those can be a game changer in your business. Now, what do those notes look like that these investors are creating? Well, first of all, good news is they're creating better quality notes than they have in the past. And a lot of that has to do with the education that people are receiving on creating a note the right way. Back years ago, I mean, we'd see notes that were just wildly creative, but they didn't have a good value because of the way that they were created. We would have to discount those notes quite drastically. For example, if someone creates a 0% interest loan, we've got to discount that loan enough to make a 10 to 12% return. And that's going to be a wallop of a discount there. If they're not papering up the right way, if they're not pre-qualifying people, all these sorts of components that go into creating a good quality note has gotten much better. I think some of that has to do with the Dodd-Frank Act. The Dodd-Frank Act says that we do need to pass a minimum threshold of somebody having the ability to afford the monthly payment, and that's done by underwriters and RMLOs and those sorts of things. So the quality has been better. One of the ways that people will do this is they may pay cash for the house and just create a note. But oftentimes, these real estate investors will borrow money to acquire the property, or they'll assume the existing loan. Okay. If they borrow money on a property, if it's coming out of foreclosure, if they borrow money on that property, that's going to be a first lien. When they turn around and sell it, there'll be a second lien that wraps around that. Right? If they are buying the property with a loan already on it, and they are assuming the payment responsibility, then same thing. There's an existing lien on the property, and when they sell it, there'll be a loan that wraps around it. So it's very common for us as note investors to see what are called wrap or wraparound mortgages. So let me share my screen and go over an example here with you. So wraps, as they're known, or wraparound mortgages are just that. There's an underlying loan that has a more senior position, and then the second loan simply wraps around that. Now, generally, when these are created, they're not meant to be a permanent thing. They're meant to, at some point in time, be paid off. So here's an example for you. A real estate investor finds a good foreclosure deal. When a property goes through foreclosure, the deed is cleansed. There's no debt on the property, anything like that. Any kind of liens or judgments, anything else that were on the property is wiped away through that foreclosure process. So the borrower looking to buy this foreclosed property borrows money from a bank. Now, I'm using bank. It could be a private lender. It could be a hard money lender, all of the above. They're going to do some light renovation. They're going to sell this to a qualified buyer. So pretty simple, basic model. I think most everybody would be familiar with. They're borrowing the money from a source who's acting as a bank. They're going to renovate it, turn around, and sell it to a qualified buyer. Okay, so let's say, and just using very simple terms, they get a $10,000 loan, private loan, bank loan, whatever the case might be. They just need that to supplement whatever cash that they're putting into the house here. Just want to make this a simple example. So they've got a $10,000 loan from the bank. It's placed on this property. It's recorded as a mortgage on this property, which acts as a lien on the property, and that's in the most senior position. So they get the property all renovated and they turn around and sell this property for maybe $35,000. Okay, they take the down payment and then they create a note. In this example, $29,900 note. They did it at 9.5% interest for 120 months. Now, all those terms are negotiable, but there's a couple of things in there. Most seller finance loans should be written somewhere between 8 and 10%. That's the most common area to write the interest rate for a seller financed loan. Also, with a seller finance loan, you add more present value to that note if you shorten the payback period. So instead of 30 years, see if you can do 10 years, see if you can do 20 years, 15 years, something like that to shorten that term. That'll increase the monthly payments, but it also increases the present value of that loan should you go on to resell that loan. Okay, so we took whatever down payment that was there on a $35,000 sale, and now you've got this new note in mortgage that is on the property, but this new note wraps around that existing $10,000 bank loan. So essentially, that wrap is really more in a second position. Okay, it's an inferior position on that. So when we buy wraps, we want to make sure that the underlying bank loan gets paid off first, because we would much prefer to be in first position than second position. Buying seconds is a whole different ball games. So we want to go to first position on this. How do we do that? That underlying loan would have to be paid out of the proceeds of the sale. So let me lay it out for you here. So you've got this mortgage and note, $29,900. The payments on that come out to $387 per month. So the new occupant of the newly renovated home is sending the real estate investor who did the seller financing $387 per month. That real estate investor, though, is still obligated to pay the bank loan. So let's say the bank payments are $100 per month. So the real estate investor obviously is netting $287 a month. They get the $387 in, they're still obligated to pay the $100 to the bank, and now they're getting $287 per month. Fine, nothing wrong with that scenario. You do have to disclose the fact to the people who have moved in the house to to live in it, that there is an underlying senior lien on the property. So that's disclosed all through the paperwork. But that's how it works. And you can see this was done really on a temporary basis to acquire the property quickly, get it renovated, get it resold, sell it like this, and then at some point in time it gets resolved, meaning that underlying bank loan gets paid off. Well, the most common way to do it is for this real estate investor who wants to get on to the next real estate deal is to sell that paper. Now, they're still going to have to sell that paper at a discount, okay? So this real estate investor who's now the note owner here, maybe he listed for sale on PaperStack or what have you, he's looking to sell the note $29,900, and he might get $23,000 for that note. Okay, now that's a pretty high yield, so he might get a little bit more for that note. But in my example, he's got this note on the market, and it's got some payments made on it, so they seasoned it up a little bit, as we say, because the original was 120 months, right? So they've received 1 month of payments. Not a lot of seasoning, right? Not a lot of proof, smaller down payment. That means we come in at a higher yield. This might be a little too high, but you get the idea. Someone comes in and buys that note for $23,000, and it's backed by the property that's worth $38,000. Okay, so out of the proceeds of the $23,000 from the sale, they still have to pay off that underlying $10,000 from the bank. Now, we want to make sure that that's done. So we don't give that money to the real estate investor and say, hey, don't forget, pay off that underlying loan. That's all done at the closing. So when the closing is done, there's instructions to the escrow company, to the real estate attorney, however you're handling the closing, saying out of this $23,000 that we're paying for this note, 10 has to pay off the underlying loan. The other $13,000 goes to the real estate investor. They move on with their lives. We move on with our lives collecting these payments, and everybody is happy. So that $10,000 note simply goes away. And now you, the real estate note investor, are receiving $387 per month for the next 119 months, and you are in the most senior position within that note. Okay, that's how wraparounds work. So it's very simple. First, you have to identify that there is an underlying loan on that property. Especially if it wasn't borrowed money. If the investor, the real estate investor, assumed the obligation to make the payments, in other words, they bought the property subject to the existing loan, unless they disclose that, you got to make sure that you run a title report or you go to public records yourself and see that other loan on there. And if that loan doesn't have a satisfaction, it's never been paid off. Okay, so you have to identify that fact. It should be disclosed to you, obviously, but again, we trust but verify. So a title report would come in handy. That would show you there's an underlying loan on that. You'd have to know the payoff amount on that loan, and again, give instructions to who's ever handling the closing that that loan needs to be paid off out of the proceeds of the new purchase of the loan. So it might seem a little bit complicated, but when you break it down, as I did, where you're just, understanding that, yes, there is this temporary loan beneath us. It's got to be paid off. We want to make sure it's paid off directly. And obviously, there would have to be enough in the deal where it can pay off that underlying loan. If somebody creates a poor quality loan and the note's not worth the $23,000 or what have you, like in this example, then there's simply not enough money in the deal to pay off the underlying first. That's not going to work, obviously. So we can play with the numbers, deals with hundreds of thousands of dollars, and they sell it for several $100,000, that sort of thing. It all works the same way. What's the underlying loan? Identify what that is, what is owed. You'll get that day of closing. Your money gets wired, instruction, pay that off, and everybody moves on. Everybody's happy. So there you are. I know we ran a little short on the Watercooler Wednesday this week, but got a busy agenda. I just got back from doing a presentation up in North Carolina, and that's going to lead to me speaking to a real estate investment club up in North Carolina. If you have a club or you have a group that gets together and you would like me to do a presentation for that group, just let me know. I do them all the time, and be glad to do that for your group as well. So hope you enjoy that, everybody, and we'll see you again on the next Watercooler Wednesday.